It's time for another transfer portal update from the Big Mountain.
College football transfers never stop, so we're back on the Big Mountain to keep you updated.
Hey, it's good to have you here. If you're new to the channel, I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. And Steve, we've got our, I think it's third or fourth transfer portal update that we have. Just a few names. One that I'm going to start with here, Jaden Mayava. We've talked about him, I think, every episode so far. And I'm going to go over because he had a little bit of back and forth here, commit, uncommit type of thing. So it looked like USC was going to be the favorite for him to go there. All signs were pointing towards him going to USC. Then it comes out January 8th that he commits to Georgia, a little bit out of the blue. Nobody really even knew he visited Georgia, and they have a stacked quarterback room, so he would have been basically the fourth behind three other guys. As we know, Carson Beck is coming back there as the starter. They also have Gunnar Stockton, who was a top 100 recruit a couple years ago, and Ryan Puglisi, I believe it is, who was a four-star recruit. So going into a completely stacked quarterback room in Georgia. But, you know, coach there says, I like having a stacked quarterback room. He's fine having four scholarship players that are quarterbacks. Well, there two days after that, he flips and he gets away from Georgia. He commits to USC. Of course, this is when Caleb Williams is entering the draft right now, and it's not as stacked up or down in USC in terms of their quarterback room. Miller Moss, who played in the Holiday Bowl, obviously he had that one start. He looked really good.
He looked fantastic.
6
touchdown passes.
Yeah, played very well against Louisville. So, you know, hard to judge one player in a bowl off of one thing, but certainly some talent there. And then Malachi Nelson, a big transfer to another Mountain West school. He's going to Boise State, a huge transfer for Boise State. You know, I could have done that one on a standalone, quite frankly, but I'll wrap that into my Ava here as well.
Malachi Nelson, former number 1 overall quarterback, ahead of Arch Manning in their class. So that's a huge get for them.
Yeah, so kind of big news here in the Mountain West, both in terms of Mayava finally picking a spot, USC, which is where everything was pointing, kind of threw a monkey wrench into things for a few days. And then also Malachi Nelson going to Boise. You know, they still have Madsen there. Green has transferred out. We talked about that for a couple episodes, but a huge ad there for Boise. And Mayava, as I mentioned, is still a young guy. He's got 3 years of eligibility left.
That's huge.
And you know, I think we were talking just before this. Yes, they have Moss, but he certainly, I would think, comes in and he's a 2-3 type of guy. Maybe, you know, really challenging for that starter number 1 position. Wouldn't have been the case in Georgia whatsoever. No. I'm happy for him. I think it's a better fit for him in USC. He's a Western guy. I believe he's from Nevada. I said Hawaii, I think, one time, but I believe he's from Nevada. So, you know, obviously wants to stay on the West Coast. Just seems like a better fit overall for him. So really happy. One other one I want to mention, Fresno State picks up an edge receiver from USC, a junior, Corey Foreman. He was a 5-star class of 21 guy. Huge ad for Fresno State. They had a decent defense last year, but if they're going to get a shutdown guy that Foreman may be, that's a huge ad for the Bulldogs. I'm anxious to see what else the Bulldogs maybe do over the offseason here, but a really good ad for Fresno State. So usually we start with the Big Ten. I caught an audible. We started with the Mountain West, but now I want to get to the Big Ten because I know there was a big addition to one of the big schools there. So what do we got?
Okay, so before I jump into the Big Ten in my area, I just want to say those are some huge pickups for Mountain West schools. I'm liking this trend that we're starting to see. We'll see if it develops into a trend.
Sure, right.
Of, you know, these talented players that are going to programs like USC, where for whatever reason just doesn't work out. I mean, USC's bringing in how many 5-stars per year via the transfer portal, via recruiting, and not everybody's going to quite work out. There'll be, you know, competitors that where one wins, one loses, whatever. But it's setting up a great opportunity. We've talked about the transfer portal. It's a great opportunity for players to go somewhere else, get another opportunity, get a fresh start. Great opportunity for the Mountain West, getting some really talented players that for one reason or another, if it doesn't work out at a school like USC, they get a second chance to go to the Mountain West, get some starting time. And that's an opportunity for the Mountain West to get an influx of talent. So I like it.
And 2 things on that. So I'll put a link up top. We actually did do an episode on that whole, is the group of 5 losing players to the Power 5. I know we're going to stop calling it that, but that's what it was this year. And we talked a lot about that. These second and third string guys on some of these bigger programs that aren't able to play and looking for just a chance to show their skills. And I think you're seeing that. Now, you're not going to see that all the time. We're going to stay on that again. I'll put a link here if you want to go back and check out that episode, because we really talk in depth about where is this going to lead. Because there's a lot of people scared that the talent drain, if you will, from the group of 5 or what's going to be the group of 8 to the Power 2. And quite frankly, we talked about, and the article that we were referencing was kind of more in line with that, but we talked about how it's creating opportunity
both ways
for some of these kids, and you're seeing that right here with at least these transfers. Little bit small sample size, but we're going to stay on that. The other thing I'm going to say, since we're talking Mountain West and maybe growth of the Mountain West, we're going to come out, or we just came out actually, with another episode on the scheduling agreement between the Mountain West and the Pac-2 right now. So again, I'll put a link up here. You can check that episode out as well. We got a little bit more details on that, but I'll stop there. I know we're talking transfer portal stuff, so what do you got?
So the biggest transfer this week for the Big Ten, Will Howard, former Kansas State quarterback, going to Ohio State. This is a huge move. A couple of the portal episodes where we did, I said, what is Ohio State doing?
Right.
What are they doing at quarterback? Who's going to be their quarterback? So obviously a huge move. And here's the thing about Ohio State. Let's remember, all the focus has been on Michigan. They won the national title. It's all they've beaten Ohio State 2 in a row. Well, 2 years ago, or 3 in a row, I guess it is now. They had beaten them twice in a row coming in. The first couple times were just not contests. Michigan just blew them out of the water. This year, Ohio State was on a game-tying or possibly game-winning drive at the end.
Yeah.
They throw an interception. That game was very close. And so you have one of the best rosters in the country, a team that was just very close from competing for a Big Ten title, competing for a playoff spot, and could have been in that same position that Michigan was.
Right.
They lose their quarterback, which we've already talked about. So getting Will Howard, comes from Kansas State. They won the Big 12 title in 2022. He went 12-5 as Kansas State starter that year. They beat TCU to win the championship game. He's going to be a fifth-year senior with only 1 year of eligibility remaining. So this is a great opportunity for him. He's done everything he can do at Kansas State.
Right.
He could have gone into the NFL, and there were some quotes this week that talked about him going into the NFL. But instead of going to the NFL, he chose to go play for Ryan Day at Ohio State. Ryan Day has those bona fides, those credentials. 3 first-round picks at quarterback since 2019, including this year's Rookie of the Year favorite, C.J. Stroud, who just won a playoff game last night.
Yeah.
The Houston Texans demolishing the Browns.
Yep.
Been fantastic all season. So no matter what you think, there's certain people that think, okay, Ryan Day maybe can't get it done as the guy to beat Michigan and win a national title, but he sure has a history of developing quarterbacks, and so this is a great spot for Howard. He's started 27 games in his career, so we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
The importance of having a lot of starts under your belt. He's already got 27. He's going to get another, however many, at least 12 probably for Ohio State. He's thrown for almost 6,000 yards in his career. So this is the place where he can take that next stage in development and really show himself instead of maybe a third, fourth round pick. As can he be that top 10 guy, that first quarterback taken to go to the draft? So huge pickup for them and a huge chance for him. I have one other guy I want to talk about, but do you have any comments?
Yeah,
about
I would
Howard?
say I think that's a win-win for both parties,
Yes.
right? It's taking him to another level, one of the top teams in one of the Power 2 conferences next year. It's going to be able for him to show his skills if he wants to be one of the top, if not the top quarterback taken. So good point. I also want to give a shout out to him. He's a home state boy for us, only about an hour and a half away from where we're recording here. So, I always like to see more local talent do well. We're not known necessarily for massive football like a Texas or something, but shout out for him there. The other thing, do you have a date on when he announced that by chance? I didn't look for a date.
I don't have a date.
Okay, so I did see some I want to tie this back to Jaden, because I saw some rumorings that there was some thinking that he might go to USC, which may have been why he first committed. Maava first committed to Georgia. Then when Howell goes to OSU, it kind of opens that quarterback room, more opportunity for Maava. So these may have been, I don't know, they're not tied together, but it creating that kind of whirlpool, so to speak, of when one guy goes, where are the other opportunities? So I did see that. I don't know if that's the case or not, but certainly was interesting when that name kind of popped up when he went to OSU.
You know, in every sport for years, we've been talking about that coaching carousel, about how, you know, the coaching moves going around. Well, now in college football, we have the quarterback carousel.
Yeah.
That's a good point with him. You see that with Washington. We're going to talk about Washington a little bit more later. Quarterback that went there, and it's just this kind of musical chairs. But it gives these quarterbacks the best opportunity to go and find the best spot for them, and it gives teams an opportunity. Maybe if you're a complete team and all you need is a starting caliber quarterback, great opportunity for them. So that leads me to one other guy. He's not a Big Ten player, but we kind of adopted him from Oregon State, Cam Ward. From
Washington State.
From Washington State. We kind of adopted him this year. Those two teams, Washington State and Oregon State. He had a fantastic start to the season. Then Washington State, they had some struggles, but really good, solid season. He was basically debating. We talked about this a few times, debating between going to the NFL or staying in college and transferring to a spot. We talked about Ohio State as being a potential destination for him. So a couple weeks ago, he announces that he's going to the NFL. He puts out a video. He's going to the NFL. Everything looks great. All of a sudden, very suddenly, in the last 24 to 48 hours, takes that down and announces that he's staying in college. He's transferring to Miami. So who knows? Who knows what the carousel piece was that was there that they thought was going to Miami? He's going to go to Miami. I think it's a good opportunity for him. He was kind of Washington State their fans have a lot of passion. They don't quite get that national attention and exposure that some of the East Coast programs do. So we both questioned, was he ready for the NFL? If he goes to the NFL, really, where is he going to get drafted? Is he ready? So this gives him another year, get some more exposure at a program like Miami, who whether they're winning or they're losing, Miami's getting a ton of attention, the national landscape. So I think this is good for him. It's definitely very exciting. He's going to go to Miami, probably going to walk in as the starter there. This is a good opportunity for him to increase his NFL potential for next year.
Agree. I think it was a very smart decision by him to take another year in college here at another university, again, to show his talents, try to increase his draft stock into next year. Or a year from now. And at this point, a lot of the big names there for a while, the quarterbacks hit pretty early. Then there was pretty large lull and things just weren't happening. The names we talked about here, Howell being one of them, Cam Ward being one of them. Maava kind of happened a little bit late. There was that he announced and then he didn't announce and you couldn't find anything. So, at this point, I would say most quarterbacks, big name quarterbacks, they've kind of settled in at this point. Still obviously a couple out there, but we're seeing at least the teams that we cover, the names that we cover have all kind of settled in. Let's talk about the big one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So I have to say this. Steve called this the day that it happened. And reports started coming out just a few days ago where you're seeing all of this Washington talent saying they're going to go to the draft or they're looking to transfer, but specifically the draft. And I'm going to just hit the big names here. Everybody probably saw it. Penix, Johnson, Odunze, Polk, Trice. I mean, just this plethora of players. And as soon as I think it was Odunze and Johnson both announced within an hour or something of each other, you texted me and said, I'll bet you DeBoer's going to Alabama. He just announced it to the players. That's why they're doing this. And sure enough, I think it was the end of that day, if I remember correctly. The news did come out that DeBoer,
he was expected to.
He was expected
to be a meeting the
right,
next morning.
Right. It wasn't confirmed, but it was kind of it was let out. The cat was out of the bag that he was going to be doing that. And obviously, that was a team player meeting where he did that, then the players did what they did. And I don't think, of all those guys, they're all ready at this point. Would they have stayed one more year or some of them for DeBoer to try to, maybe. But those names, you talked about Ward staying back because he maybe needed to simmer a little bit longer. I agree. Odunze's ready. Penix is ready. Johnson, we'll see how he does.
Running backs don't have a long shelf life, so
true, right. True. And Polk is a great talent. Got lost a little bit with Odunze there, but he's really strong too. And let me go over a list of transfers, and then I'll throw it to you, Steve. So we know that the tight end Watson, really strong player, is going to Texas A&M. Another receiver, Lyons, is going to Utah, and then a plethora of players that have not committed yet, but have at least put their name into the transfer portal. You have backup quarterbacks in Rogers and Haskell that are looking to transfer. You have safeties in Powell and Turner. You have a quarterback in Muhammad who was outstanding, kind of got injured there. We're still be able to play, but really good cornerback. Their shutdown guy there for the season. So a plethora of talent. Just, unfortunately for the Huskies, losing a lot here, but you get that, right? They're there for that team. They're there for the coaching staff and the coach. Some of these guys were already moving on with the draft, so kind of just a snowball that you couldn't stop, quite frankly. So what are you thinking there, Steve?
Well, first of all, the funny thing when you look at these coaching changes and you start to see a pattern over the years, a lot of these coaches have the same agent. Okay, Jimmy Sexton, I believe, is the agent for DeBoer, was the agent for Saban. A lot of guys, I think in the past he was James Franklin's agent. So you see those names, the other guys that he's representing, they come out in articles. As soon as Saban retires, you start to see Dabo, Sweeney, Dan Lanning, James Franklin.
Those are all the names that I saw.
Yes, you see, and a lot of those guys are represented by Jimmy Sexton. So you see those names get thrown out there, and then you start to see, okay, Mike Norvell, another guy, Florida State.
Yes, right. Who just signed an extension.
Exactly.
Anyway.
You see the news. He's signing an extension. Sark signing an extension. Everyone's signing extensions.
You know who's making the most money in all this, I think?
Jimmy Sexton.
There you go.
Yeah,
so
for
I
doing nothing.
Don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, good point. And so that kind of, and Dan, really the guy that I thought that I texted you at first when Saban retired, Dan Lanning. He would have been but really DeBoer and Dan Lanning, very similar. Thing. So anyway, so you start to see those signings. You start to see the guys saying they're staying where they are. And then all of a sudden, I think a lot of those guys probably would have gone to the NFL anyways.
Agree.
But they were waiting around. They wanted to have their conversation. They want to see their draft stock. And I mean, just boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, they start coming out that day, and it was just the writing was on the wall. I think it's a great move for. I mean, it's a great move for DeBoer. I mean, it's hard. He's following the probably the best college football coach of all time. There can be an argument different ways, but definitely the best coach in the modern era. So that's a little bit tough, but he's going to one of the best programs in the country, making I'm sure one of the top salaries, going to have the top resources in that talent belt. So it's a great move for him. I feel a little bad for Washington. They're moving into the Big Ten. They just had their their best year since I think 1991. Just a fantastic year. Came one game short of winning a national championship. So I'm sure their fans are probably crushed. They felt like, hey, we're going into the Big Ten as the big man on campus, basically. And now they're getting knocked down a couple pegs. It's normal. You lose guys when there's a transfer. You lose guys after a big season. So overall, not anything really shocking out of this, but I do feel bad for those Washington Husky fans because you go from walking into the Big Ten with your head held high to, oh boy, what are we getting into?
Well, and I would say I would love to see most of that team, most of this Husky team from this year, minus a few players just because of normal turnover, at least one season as is in the Big Ten to see what kind of disruption they would have. Would have been a ton of fun to see it. And again, I'm not throwing the towel in for the Huskies here, but just a lot of talent that's getting lost here. But, restock the fridge and you're good to go. But I would have liked to have seen this team play in the Big Ten for one. This player team.
The team with those players.
With those players.
Yes.
Thank you. Can't talk. Get into the Big Ten first for season.
So we talk about Jimmy Sexton being the biggest winner in this, okay? With all these guys getting extensions and whatever. As far as the team, the program that's the biggest winner, the Oregon Ducks, okay? Both of those programs coming into the Big Ten together. They're kind of the rivals up there. They fight over a lot of the same talent. They're keeping everything together. They got Dan Lanning is staying there. Most of their team is staying together. Yes, they are losing their quarterback. He's like 40 years old. He's almost as old as us. But so much talent they're bringing in. They've already got two quarterbacks coming in to replace them.
Right.
So much talent. They are going to be a powerhouse coming into the Big Ten. Now we'll see. can they play that Big Ten brand of football with their lines and things like that? We'll see how that goes. But that's a huge, for their biggest kind of direct rival, I think it's a huge win for Oregon because they're coming into the Big Ten a completely different position than Washington.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to wrap up with, I have to throw this in here because it's for the Pokes. So the Pokes, as I think everyone knows, Coach Bowl has retired. The defensive coordinator, Sauvel, has come in to be the head coach. I'm real happy with that. Actually, Bowles' son, who has been on the coaching staff for a while, is going to be the new defensive coordinator. So that's fantastic to see. And they actually hired a new offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator with Michigan State. I think Johnson is his last name, if I remember correctly. So he's coming from a Big Ten school. I know they had a couple down years. But 2 years ago when they went, was it 11-2 or something like that? He was the OC there. Yeah. So, I have to throw in some news about my Cowboys, kind of the coaching staff there. They're getting things under order. I mean, you look at that team, very, very little transfers out. I know they're pretty excited with their signing day additions and things. So I got to throw in some Poke news.
Can we throw in the Stacey Collins news then as well?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Stacey Collins, special teams coordinator at Penn State, going back to Boise. He was there in the past.
Yep.
Going back to Boise to be the special teams coordinator plus, I think, assistant head coach.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so, we've talked about Boise and how they like to keep things in-house. They like to, Boise people and bring them back. So he's got great connections up there in the Pacific Northwest. He's brought a couple players all the way to Penn State from, that Washington area.
Right.
So I think it's a great move for them, bringing a guy back like that because they're overhauling their staff, from the coach leaving last year. So to get that experience, the guy, he came in, he had some experience at Penn State. He can, and he's familiar with Boise State, obviously, from being there before. So to come back, good recruiter up there. So that's not a huge move, but I figured it was worth mentioning since we're talking about the Cowpokes.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, with that, we'll wrap this one up. We will stay on the transfer portal. Things look like they're slowing down a little bit, but we're going to keep our eye on it. When there's newsworthy information, we'll bring it to you. Make sure you give us a like. Make sure you give us a subscribe. With that, we'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.